And we are back. We are headed into week 12. It is the Football Diehards Wednesday DFS stream. Brady, my man, on Twitter at DFS_numbers. Go ahead and follow this guy. Shoot this guy the follow. How did week 11 treat you? How was it? It was the funniest, maybe the dumbest week of the season in terms of if you play on FanDuel, having like Taysom Hill as an option at tight end. It's kind of a joke. Even on like DraftKings, he was kind of really hard to get away from at 4,900, but at least he was at the appropriate position. How did you handle like a goofy, silly week 11?
Yeah, it was insane, especially from a FanDuel perspective as well. I did pretty decent in cash. I did fine in single entries and in tournaments, not so well. One of those cases where I had all the right players, just could not get them in the right lineup. Keenan Allen did fantastic for me in cash. I did not have much of them in tournaments, which hurt, but overall, not the worst week in the world, but could have been a lot better. And I do like this slate a lot better than last week's. Last week's we talked about it like it was a really tough slate, so really looking forward to talking to it here.
Yeah, I don't generally love when there is good chalk. Like I think the field was even maybe underweight on what they should have done on both sides. Like he should have been, I think efficient ownership would have been north of 90% for Taysom Hill on FanDuel. I mean, what are the odds that a starting quarterback is on a point? Like he was even cheap on FanDuel too, is the worst thing. If he was 7K on FanDuel at tight end, you'd be like, oh, well, there's a decision. But I don't think there was a Kelsey on the slate. We didn't have Waller. Obviously, we don't have Kittle. I believe all those guys are off the main slate. So it was Taysom Hill or bust, and he didn't come in quite as highly owned as I expected. About the same thing on DraftKings, but at least there was a conversation we had. We don't have to worry about that this week. He is listed at the right position, and he is actually expensive. You have to consider who you're playing if you play him. So let's get into it. The first game I have on my list of the main slate games is the Chargers versus Buffalo. This is, I believe, going to be one of the chalkiest games of the week. We have two like elite young quarterbacks, at least in the way they're playing this season, squaring off in a game with the 53.5 point total, 5.5 spread in favor of Buffalo. What do you make of this game? I really think it's going to be difficult to get different, but do you have to if you're just playing the best plays? You tell me what you're doing.
Yeah, so it's extremely hard to get away from this game just because I like it on both sides. I like the Josh Allen stack. I like his weapons. I like Diggs. I like Beasley. I like Brown. I think it's really easy to stack that as well because Brown's 4,800. Beasley's kind of cheap as well. And I also like the run back options on each side. Keenan Allen has been absolutely fantastic at 8,000. They finally priced him up appropriately, but still I'm probably going to keep playing him. The dude is just an absolute monster. Last week, 19 targets. And this dude is an absolute target monster, averaging 21.1 DraftKings points. So I think I'm going to have some lineups with stacks of each side here. I don't really think I'm going to get away from it all that much. Probably would prefer I'll go the Josh Allen side because I do think it's going to be easier to fit in like John Brown and Cole Beasley. I like those as like cheap options there. Something I do want to mention was Austin Eckler is on the IR. I don't know if he's going to come back this week. Do you know if he's going to come back?
So they haven't decided yet. I mean, they activated him as of, it was either Monday or Tuesday, but even once you're activated, I believe it is a 21-day window until you are like mandated to return, or I'm guessing if you don't, you're just ruled out for the season. So he's been practicing, he is activated. I would argue that means it looks good that he plays, but no guarantee. Like I think we saw Sony Michel be activated 2 weeks before he was actually like even like on the active roster. He still got like healthy scratch. So it's no guarantee that he plays. It does look maybe 60-40 that he plays. I'll be honest, I both like him and Kalen Ballage because if Eckler comes back, I think he does the Eckler things. He should be Austin Eckler. And I would say that some players coming back, like we saw this with Christian McCaffrey, there were rumors that were true, but there were rumors that he would be splitting the role with Mike Davis in their first game back. One, that wasn't even true. And two, it dropped his ownership. I believe at least it dropped his ownership significantly. I don't even think we have to worry about that with Austin Eckler because he was never a 3-down back anyways. He thrived off of being one of the best pass catchers and incredibly efficient, like Alvin Kumar. Like, I don't think, like, what do you scale his role back to? I don't think we see that when he returns. So if it's this week, I'll be all over him. If not, I think Kalen Ballage is perfectly fine too. He's going to be, I'd imagine, chalky. He's like underpriced. He's just under 6K, I believe. And the role he's seeing is like 16 carries and like 5 or 6 targets a game. That's quite impressive. I still think it is, even if it's popular, still good leverage off of, your Hunter Henrys and your Keenan Allens, even if it itself isn't a low-owned play by any means. So I like where your head's at. I don't really care if it's Austin Eckler or Kalen Ballage. I love Eckler if he plays. If not, it's going to be a lot of Kalen Ballage. I guess you feel the same way about both running backs, given that you sounded a little excited around Eckler.
Yeah, 100% with you there. I mean, Eckler at 6,100 in a game that's projected to score this high. I do think there's some touchdown opportunities, so I will be all over it. And people don't really like playing guys that are coming off injuries. It definitely lowers the ownership, but I'm not scared of that at all. And like you said at Balaj, if Eckler's not playing 5,100, it looks like he's definitely the dude when Eckler's not out there. So yeah, I like Balaj as well.
Yeah, in this game, I think a lot of it is like if you're wanting to get weird, the running backs for the Chargers, whomever it happens to be. And on the other side, John Brown, I believe, did not practice on Tuesday. I'm not sure if he practiced today. If he doesn't play, Gabriel Davis enters the picture. I believe he's minimum price at 3K. He'd probably end up being popular. I like Cole Beasley. You can't tell me not to play Cole Beasley when every time John Brown steps off the field, whether it be because he never took the field or because he got injured in the middle of the game, Cole Beasley smashes. I believe there have been 4 games that John Brown was either completely absent or left before the game ended. And in those games, Cole Beasley is averaging over 8 catches for over 90 yards per game. And like, of course, it's a small sample. I'm sure some of those were shootouts. I don't really care. I think that is also just as indicative of his role whenever John Brown is out. So I think Cole Beasley is probably the leverage play I'm looking for on the Buffalo side. I'm still fine. I'm not saying like you have to leverage Josh Allen. I think I'm just saying that when I'm playing, whether or not I guess I'm playing Josh Allen, I'm probably going to have a lot of Cole Beasley. I'm double stacking him with Diggs and Allen whenever I play Allen. And if not, I'll probably just make it a secondary stack with like a Balaj or a Keenan Allen. Keenan Allen is so good that I'm fine eating the chalk with him. But secondary stacking those guys with the Cole Beasley specifically.
I like it.
Let's see. I think that covers every aspect of this game. Any love for these Buffalo running backs? You couldn't free roll me to pay these guys. They've like this team. To their credit, Josh Allen is playing well, and they're like let it rip, man. Both run and pass with Josh Allen. They don't really run the ball a ton, and they don't give one back a specific fantasy relevant role. I have no interest in these guys.
Yeah, I don't have any interest in that. I'm just going to attack the Buffalo game from the passing side. Yeah, I'd rather go like elsewhere.
Yeah, I agree. The next game I have is Carolina versus Minnesota. The Vikings are 4-point favorites, 48.5-point total. This line opened with, it didn't open. It opened without a line because we were getting reports, or we didn't have our reports yet on Teddy Bridgewater. Matt Rule said he expects Bridgewater to play, and he does not expect Christian McCaffrey to play. I don't think McCaffrey's technically been ruled out, but for all intents and purposes, he is. Seems like probably another good week to play Mike Davis, given his role. On the other side, like Dalvin Cook, quite obvious. Justin Jefferson, we kind of have to wait. I don't think we have had a definitive statement on Thielen yet. I know he recorded both a positive and a negative test, so they thought maybe it was a false positive. I don't think we have answers on him yet, as far as I remember. So I'm going to, I'll talk about them both. I think it's all good plays. The problem here is like, how do I get different in this game necessarily? The Viking side specifically is so obvious. Like Thielen, Jefferson, great plays. I'm not interested in a tight end, Dalvin Cook, and that's about it.
Yes, I have a lot of interest in this game. I think there's some different ways you can attack it. So I actually like the Bridgewater stack this week against Minnesota's passing defense, who is really, really bad. And the good thing about that is the pass catching options for Carolina are so cheap. DJ Moore, 6,200. Robbie Anderson, 6,100. I like both of them. I think you can put them both in the same lineup, actually, because of how cheap they are. Like Minnesota's passing defense is really, really awful. So I kind of like that. And of course, you have some really good run back options. Jefferson, especially, if Thielen is not playing, I'm going to be all over Jefferson, as a lot of people are, at 6,300. And we got to kind of mention him. Dalvin Cook, the man, 9,500. It's kind of interesting here. I don't know what I'm going to do yet. That's very, very pricey. I think I'm going to plug him in cash, but I do think that he's going to be very high owned. And that price, he's going to have to go off, and he very well can. Like Carolina's run defense is awful, but I don't know. I might be underweight to the field on Dalvin Cook just because of the price there. And other than that, I guess Irv Smith Jr. is someone you can touch on, 3,100 for a cheap punt tight end. But other than that, I really do want to attack this Minnesota passing defense through the air.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that is like, I'm not going to get cute with my Minnesota side of the ball. The way I get cute with them is correlating them with less owned guys on the other side. Like I think Teddy Bridgewater coming in with the injury is going to be very unpopular relative to the field. I think, we're going to see probably decent ownership on like a Robbie Anderson, maybe less so on DJ Moore. Probably deserves to be the case. I'm kind of shocked that Robbie Anderson is priced below DJ Moore, even if it's just $100. I know DJ Moore is like really kind of turned his season around after starting off pretty quiet, and I like him. I will be playing him, I swear. But man, Robbie Anderson, a top 10 target share, a top 10 air yard share at 6,100 on a passing offense that gets a great matchup and has not been bad. It's not like I'm saying like play, Brashad Perriman because he has good market share numbers. Teddy Bridgewater is a good quarterback operating an efficient offense. I'm double stacking Teddy Bridgewater. I'm correlating my Dalvin Cooks with, lots of Robbie Anderson, a decent amount of DJ Moore. I think you could even argue Curtis Samuel gets thrown in there. I agree. I'm going head over heels on the Teddy Bridgewater side of things, and then I don't need to get weird on the other side. Just play the good plays.
I agree. I like it.
This next game. All right, so this next game is interesting. It has a lower total. It's actually coming up, though. It opened at 48. Now it's at 50. It is the New England Patriots versus the Kyler Murray and the Arizona Cardinals. I mean, I like a lot of players. The problem is pricing and ownership. For me, Kyler Murray at, I believe he's 8,200 and DeAndre Hopkins at 81. I know they're both over 8K. For Kyler Murray to have a ceiling game as a quarterback where he hits 4 or 5x, like one that's 40 points. Two, that also means that he likely put up 100 on the ground and scored, or maybe, 70, 80, 2 scores, whatever it happens to be. Those are all points, yards, touchdowns that are coming out of the overall pie that you need for DeAndre Hopkins. They are both so expensive that is like, if Kyler Murray hits his ceiling, he probably has to do it with rushing. Does that mean DeAndre Hopkins doesn't hit his ceiling? I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of hard here. I mean, I really like the matchup against the Patriots, who have not been all that great this year defensively. Of course, Murray's going to gain some ownership, as will Hopkins, every single week. I just don't know. I think there's a lot of quarterbacks I like down in the lower range. I don't know if I'm really going to go up and pay for a Kyler Murray as much this week, but I definitely get it. But like you mentioned, Murray and Hopkins stack like that's very, very expensive. And how are you going to fit in like a guy like Dalvin Cook? Some other good running back plays we'll talk about. So I don't know how much I'm going to go there. On the flip side, if you want like a cheaper stack, Cam Newton's really interesting. It's just, who do you pair him with? I thought Jordan Myers was the guy, but Bird went out there last week, had himself a game, 7 targets, 6 receptions, 29.3 DraftKings points, which sucked because I had a ton of Myers. Myers didn't do awful. Only 3 targets, 3 receptions, had like 38 yards. But man, I really thought Myers was the guy. Maybe he still is, but I don't know. I'm not going to honestly have much of this game because I do think it will gain some ownership, especially from the Arizona side. But if anything, maybe look at a Cam Newton stack. But even then, like, I'm not all that interested in it.
Yeah, I think the problem for me is exactly what you're alluding to. I just could not predict for the life of me what is going to happen with these receivers. I agree. It was the Myers show and no one else for 3 weeks. It was, a tiny but at least growing sample size. And then he goes out, not only gets outproduced by Damiere Byrd, but even N'Keal Harry, I believe, saw more targets than him. So we're having 3 guys now in the mix, plus James White, who I believe saw like 9 targets, really 4 pass catching options, all competing for shares of a very small pie, as this team is one of the most run-heavy teams in the NFL. So for that reason, I feel like my ceiling is fairly capped unless I get the crazy Bird game. I think more of their games in the median kind of look like maybe James White. I believe he went like 6 for 60 on 9 targets or something. That's not bad. I'm just not sure what ceiling we see from these guys. And even if we do see a ceiling, what is my ability to predict it? It seems like close to 0, given that I was not even thinking about Damiere Byrd. It never even crossed my mind last week, and he absolutely eviscerated me because I also had some Myers. So the run backs don't seem appealing. The primary stack of Kyler Murray is just so cost prohibitive when you do the DeAndre Hopkins thing. Maybe my only unique approach is I would argue a Kyler Murray to Christian Kirk. You can have Kyler Murray steal 110 yards on the ground and a touchdown and still throw for, even if it's just 250 and 2 touchdowns. That production is enough for Christian Kirk to get there. He doesn't need a crazy amount of that to get there under 6K. DeAndre Hopkins would have to get like half of the receiving production and one, if not both, of the touchdowns to really pay off his value if we don't see Kyler Murray hit 300 yards and 3 scores, which is probably unlikely. So for me, maybe a cheeky secondary receiver plus Kyler Murray stack because it actually can pay off its price. Outside of that, I think this is a very unique spot in that it has a good total, and I'm still struggling to be interested in. The next game, sort of the same, actually, honestly. It is a 49-point total that is on the rise by 2.5 points. Jacksonville versus the Cleveland Browns. James Robinson is going to draw a ton of ownership, I believe, because he is well underpriced in the low 6K range, despite last week until the final drive when there weren't even a ton of starters on the field, like James Robinson was on the field. He did not cede a single target or a single carry to another running back on his team. Like, he is arguably the most used running back in the entirety of the NFL. He topped 1,000 yards from scrimmage on the season last week, and I just feel meh about him. His price is good. His volume is good. It's just that, like, am I really excited to get him at like a less than 21 total as 6.5 point underdogs to the Cleveland Browns? I don't know. I think honestly, in the same game, I would rather look to a Nick Chubb. And I know, unlike Robinson, I guess, Nick Chubb is not going to see all of the backfield touches. He's going to cede almost all of the targets and 10 plus carries to Kareem Hunt. This team is passing at like less than 30 times per game. They're one of the most run heavy teams in the NFL, and they're massive favorites. I don't think you need to get 80% of the carries for Nick Chubb to have a massive day. He's got back-to-back 100-yard games since returning. He looks like the old Nick Chubb, and now he gets a terrible Jacksonville defense. I think he's good leverage off of James Robinson, honestly, because we know running backs in the same game generally have like a decent amount of negative correlation, especially when for Nick Chubb, he gets there solely as a runner. That means he's breaking off long chunks of yardage, probably chewing up clock. All these things not great for James Robinson. Also, he goes off when his team is favored. So I don't know. I think James Robinson is like honestly a fine play in cash. I just feel as though I can gain leverage with an already in his own right good play by playing Nick Chubb. Neither passing game really gives me any interest.
Yeah, I'm actually 100% with you. I am all aboard the Nick Chubb train this week, 7,100. The dude's really good, and you mentioned the Browns run the ball a ton, 114 yards last week against Philadelphia, 126 against Houston, and he gets a fantastic matchup here against Jacksonville. And like you said, they're like 6-point favorites. I love that for Nick Chubb. That means he's going to be on the field more. He's going to be running the ball more, 20-plus carries easily for him. And yeah, he's been looking good coming back from injury. So yeah, third week back, I think he's going to do fantastic this week. The matchup's fantastic. So I will be all over Nick Chubb. Hopefully the ownership is not too crazy. I don't see many people talking about him. James Robinson, I'm not overly interested at that 6,300 just because he doesn't have much pass catching upside. I'd rather go up and get a Chubb for what, $800, $700 more there. Is Jacksonville missing their quarterback? I think I saw a tweet that Glennon's starting. Is that true?
Yeah, Jake Luton went out and got absolutely buried by Pittsburgh last week. I watched that game. It's a miserable outing. So, and I guess Gardner Minshew's still not healthy, I would assume. So, yeah, Mike Glennon is going to be under center. He's not good. Arguably, he's an improvement over what we saw from Luton, but like that is an improvement on one of the worst quarterback performances of the season. So, yeah, this offense is kind of a train wreck right now. Robinson can push through it. Like any player getting 20 carries and 4 targets in a game can push through a bad offense, but I don't like to bet on their odds of doing so at high ownership.
Yeah, we talk about this sometimes, and I kind of like the Chubb and Browns defense stack there. I really like that this week.
I completely agree. I think that is another just good correlation play to make, especially because it's negative correlation. It's big negative correlation with James Robinson, who does project to be chalk, and I get it. High volume, maybe the most used running back, like I said. Good price. It's simply that his team does not seem to be in a spot that you want to be targeting any of them, honestly. So let's move on. We have Indianapolis versus the Tennessee Titans, a 51.5 point total. Another one. I mean, these totals are all just rising. We're back to these classic 2020 slates where we get 4 or 5 games of a 50-point total. This game, I struggle a little bit with because it has a very solid total. I simply just don't know what to make specifically of the Indianapolis side. We have had 2 games of Jonathan Taylor over or at 20 carries. I think they're separated by about 8 or 9 weeks. It was like weeks 2 and most recently week 11. So it's that 8 games if they had a bye in the middle. Maybe they commit to him. Maybe it's finally Jonathan Taylor season and we just get to ride these like Dynasty 101 picks to the bank for the rest of the season. However, I don't feel incredibly confident in predicting that given that the other 9 games of the season or whatever, or maybe 8 if they had a bye, he hasn't been used hardly at all relative to Jordan Wilkins getting work, Nyheim Hines stealing pass catching work. Is the pass catchers, I like Michael Pittman. He saw 3 targets last week in a shootout. I mean, they had, I think, 3 or 4 other players see more targets than him on his own team. I still think I would project him to be the number 1 receiver because they've simply gotten no production, like no ceiling games, no floor out of any of Zach Pascal, Marcus Johnson, T.Y. Hilton. So I'm going to bet on if all those guys are not doing much, Michael Pittman looking efficient outside of last week was drawing a decent amount of volume. He should still be the number 1 receiver. I don't feel supremely confident, but enough so that I'm willing to go back to him. Not going crazy on him. I don't like the tight ends. They're just splitting it as a 2/3-way committee. On the other side is maybe where it gets interesting. Derrick Henry, I get this Indianapolis defense is, quote, tough or whatever, but they've had one of the easiest sketches of the season. Like they opened up, I believe they annihilated Kirk Cousins with a bunch of interceptions. They got the Jets and like scored 2 touchdowns on them. They had a very easy start to the season. And we saw last week that like when actual good teams come to town, like Aaron Rodgers, they're just any other defense. I'm sure they're an above average defense, but unless you're like Baltimore last year and New England last year, Chicago from 2 or 3 years ago, Jacksonville. There's like once every few years that I feel confident that a defense actually knocks the projection. Otherwise, I'm just mostly looking at the offense. And I like the Tennessee offense. They don't pass a lot, but they do it fairly efficiently. What do you make of the split between A.J. Brown and Corey Davis? Corey Davis, interestingly, again last week, saw just as many targets as A.J. Brown. Brown scored the touchdown on a sick play. Just like the guy is a physical freak. Corey Davis, not that, but if he's going to draw targets, what do you make of him?
Yeah, he's definitely going to draw targets. I mean, 4,900 here. I think he'll be low owned. A lot of people are scared of these defenses, and I don't think the Colts defense is like really as good as people make it to be. You mentioned they're the really easy schedule to start off the year there. So I'm kind of interested in the Derrick Henry side. I do think he's going to be lower owned. He was pretty low owned last week. I went to him. He did pretty good. Not overly concerned about the matchup. What I am concerned about is if the Colts get out ahead. When you play Henry, you want him to be out ahead running the ball last week. 28 rushing attempts, a touchdown, 133 yards, 23.2 DraftKings points. I forget his ownership, but I know it was pretty low there. So that was nice, and I'm probably going to go back to him here. You get a nice discount off of Dalvin Cook, and I think he has that same Dalvin Cook upside. I know Dalvin Cook's been a monster, but Derrick Henry's a beast in his own right there. So Henry's somebody I'm looking at 7,900 there. You get a really big discount there. Pittman, you mentioned him 5,000. And other than that, not all that interested in this game, but I'm really curious to find out what the Henry ownership is going to be for this week against the Colts here.
Yeah, I think Dalvin Cook is probably just going to kind of crowd out the expensive running backs. I'm sure Derrick Henry is not going to go unowned. He's going to have some amount of ownership. But I kind of agree. I think it's probably more in the single digit range. And he is one of three, maybe you'd have to look, probably one of three or maybe four running backs on the slate that can really compete with the ceiling that Dalvin Cook offers you. And you look, and all of them outside, maybe even Dalvin Cook, but mostly outside of Dalvin Cook, have flaws. Alvin Kumar right now, if Taysom Hill is going to do what he did last week, which is score touchdowns on the ground and not throw at all, like there was for the first time in his career, I believe Alvin Kumar didn't see a reception, didn't catch a reception. He immediately gets removed from that conversation. So there are like three running backs, Derrick Henry being one of them, that if I'm not playing Dalvin Cook, I can still access the same ceiling. I think I'm less likely to hit that ceiling. Dalvin Cook as a pass catcher and as at this season, probably a more efficient runner is a better bet to hit 35 points or whatever. That's okay. I think that is fine because I'm going to make it up both in the Derrick Henry price and the Derrick Henry ownership. I still think they have the same ceiling. It's less likely to happen with Derrick Henry, but not so far less likely that Dalvin Cook should be 20, 25, 30% owned and Derrick Henry should be 6 or 7% owned with like a multi-$1,000 discount too. So I think I'm on board with you. Let's let's run it back with Derrick Henry. And outside of that, I think Michael Pittman is a good correlation play in the same game. Outside of that, The next game is the most. We're going to talk about it for 10 seconds, I guess. So Cincinnati Bengals versus the New York Giants. I don't think I will have a single player from this game. I know Giovanni Bernard popped up with a concussion in practice. Joe Mixon, I think, is on IR or something. He's obviously not playing this week. I would assume that means Samaje Perine is the number one back, and he has to be 4,000. It would be shocking to see him at anything more than like 4,100. I don't care. His team has less than a 19 implied team total. They're underdogs, and I don't think he's a pass catcher. On the other side of the ball, again, even as a favorite, less than 25 implied team total. The 43 total in this game is the lowest of the slate. Is there any reason to look to this game? I can't find one, honestly.
No, I mean, not really. Really low total. Probably like one of the lowest totals, if not the lowest on the slate. The only guy I do want to point out, Wayne Gallman, 5,000. The dude's been getting it done. 5 touchdowns in his last 4 games, scoring in all 4 games there. 19 DraftKings points, 14, 13, 16. Getting a decent amount of usage. 18 rushing attempts last week with also 2 targets, 1 reception. I think Gallman's fine, especially in a game where they're going to be favored. They're going to be up. They're going to be running the ball more. And this Bengals defense is really bad. But other than that, this is a game I really don't want nothing to do with.
I'm on board with that, though. I think maybe I won't X out this game. I will, or maybe if I do, I will un-X out, if that's how you would say it, Wayne Gallman. So you're right. He's been pretty used. He's in a good spot. Bengals defense doesn't scare me. He's favorite. That's interesting. I actually am glad I know this now because I won't leave him out of the player pool. The next game, sort of interesting. The New York Jets versus the Miami Dolphins, 44.5 point total. Somehow one of the only totals that is dropping. Every game we have looked at so far is either neutral in that the line hasn't moved or has risen. This one dropping by 2 points. The Jets, I can hardly ever talk myself into playing Jets. The only thing I will mention is that Denzel Mims, not too far off the min, I believe he's like 3,500 right now, is in the past 4 weeks since week 7. So is that 4 weeks? Yeah. 5 weeks because I can't count.
5 weeks.
5 weeks because I can't count. I think he has a bye week in there though, which is why I'm thinking it's 4 weeks. Or I'm stupid. Both of those are totally possible. Is that he is top 5 in air yard share, top 15 in target share. Those numbers are pretty good for a guy who's 3,500. His team, like with Joe Flacco, has actually been aggressive throwing deep. I don't know how good Joe Flacco is going to be at doing that, but if he's going to do it a lot, I don't hate Mims. Salvin Ahmed is he's a decent price. He should see almost all of the carries. He's seen like over 80% of the carries and even saw 5, I believe, targets last week. He's kind of a 3-down back if Myles Gaskin doesn't return. I know Gaskin logged I think a limited practice, but no guarantee that he plays. If he doesn't, Ahmed is interesting. He's in a decent spot. Outside of that, another game that I'm really fading.
Yeah, so Ahmed, you mentioned it. If Gaskin does not play, I think Ahmed at 5,100 is really interesting there. It's kind of interesting to hear that Tua did come up with a thumb injury. I'm assuming he's still going to play. If not, I think Fitzmagic coming in at quarterback can definitely help out the Miami pass catchers there, like a Grant, like a Parker at 5,900. But if Tua's going to play, I really don't have any interest in that passing game. On the flip side, Sam Darnold, questionable. I think I heard he might play this week, and if so, I think it's good for Jamison Crowder here, 5,400. When Darnold was playing, like Crowder was getting a ton of usage. Week 1, 13 targets. Week 4, 10. Week 5, 10 targets. Week 6, 13 targets. So if Sam Darnold does play, I do have some interest in Jamison Crowder there, and also Denzel Mims, 3,500. You touched on him. But if Flacco's back, yeah, I'm not overly excited to play this game much, but looking out for those injuries to those quarterbacks. I think if Fitzmagic comes in, I think it could help out, and I think if Darnold comes in, I think it can help out. Even though, yeah, they're both pretty bad there.
All right, the next game, an actually interesting game we have is the Atlanta Falcons versus the Las Vegas Raiders. A 55-point total. The Raiders are 3-point favorites. I think the chalk is quite obvious in this game. It's going to be Josh Jacobs as a favorite against a terrible defense, both against the pass and the run. Darren Waller, as I believe, 6K on DraftKings. Honestly, him and Travis Kelce, you could tell me they're 10K. It is so difficult to pick out of all these terrible tight ends that I've felt more and more comfortable every week when we have them on the slate, which hasn't always been the case. The Chiefs seemingly always playing in prime time. But when we have them, I'm actually fine with paying up for tight end this season, almost more than any other season, because it's been such a tale of two cohorts. Terrible, but probably overpriced tight ends, and really good and fairly efficiently priced tight ends in Travis Kelce, George Kittle when he was healthy, and Darren Waller. So I'm fine with paying up for Darren Waller. I think on the other side should be fairly obvious. I think we'll get maybe Matt Ryan is the key to unlocking this game because his team is an underdog. They are passing like 39, I believe, roughly times per game. It's like top 10 in the league. They pass a lot. They have really good receivers. And Julio Jones, I believe, is 6,500 or 6,700. Anytime you tell me, we saw it the most recent time he came back from injury, I believe. Anytime you tell me Julio Jones is under 7K, I don't think his ceiling is really that much different than it has been in years past. Like 150 and a touchdown on 10 catches is certainly in his range of outcomes. If he's going to be cheap and not that popular, I'm always going back to Julio.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. 6,500 for Julio is very cheap here. Obviously, on the Las Vegas side, you have Josh Jacobs. I'm not overly high on the guy, as a lot of people are. I don't really like the amount of pass catching upside he has. Only 1 reception last week. I do like other options, especially since he's going to gain ownership. But it's kind of, I don't know. I think he's a really good play because Atlanta's defense is so bad. But I really like the Matt Ryan stack this week. I think it's going to be extremely low owned, especially from the Matt Ryan side, because last week Matt Ryan had 7.28 DraftKings points per week, and we've seen it throughout his the season this year that he has some of these really, really bad games, and he comes back and goes off at low ownership there. So I think Ryan Julio's stack is really interesting here. You mentioned he throws the ball like 39, 40 times per game, and a really good running back option with Waller, who I really like in cash tournaments as well. This Atlanta defense is very, very bad. I was kind of thinking about a Derek Carr stack, but I really don't know who I'd stack with him outside of the Darren Waller play.
Oh, well, boy, do I have the mans for you. Nelson Aguilar, after being washed out of Philadelphia. I will say, like, a first-round pick. He wasn't a downright bad. He was actually a decent college prospect. The NFL affirmed that by making him a first-round pick. He was, I believe, on the season a wide receiver 2 in his 3rd year and a wide receiver 3 in his 4th year, got phased out in his 5th year. Now he comes with, like, pedigree out of college. Obviously, his NFL success was limited at best, but he comes into this team and kind of like pushes their first round pick, Henry Ruggs, to the fringes. He has, I believe, like 5 or 6 touchdowns on the air. He saw 9 targets last week. I think like in large field contests, I'm not afraid to double stack like a Waller Nelson Aguilar. I'm not excited to do it either, but I think it is in the range of outcomes. He's like clearly cemented himself as this team's number 1 wide receiver. It's just, does that come to fruition when you have Darren Waller soaking up targets? Not often, but often enough that I think it's worth considering.
Yeah, I don't mind that at all. I mean, had a really good game last week. Yeah, I think it could be very interesting there. I do think it'll be low owned as well, and I love attacking this Atlanta passing defense. It's really, really bad.
Last one in this game, I guess 2 more. Hayden Hurst, I believe, got 0 last week. Really punched me in the teeth because I had a decent amount of game stacks of that game, and that didn't work out. And typically, when I don't know what to do at tight end, last week was the perfect example of that slate because there was just nothing to do on DraftKings at tight end without Taysom Hill at tight end. So I pick whoever correlates with my lineup, and if I'm going to make like essentially uninformed decisions. I didn't think there was an easy play at tight end. I will at least correlate my not really knowing what to do at tight end with the rest of my lineup. So if Taysom Hill hits, I'm more likely to have had this game shoot out. And last week that didn't really happen with Hayden Hurst. Are you willing to go back to Hayden Hurst? He's now under 4K, seeing around 15% of the targets. Isn't incredible. I think it's number like 14 in the NFL, but in the context of this offense throwing a lot, it is a very high total in this game. Can you go back to Hayden Hurst?
Yeah, I can definitely go back to him. A 9.6 DraftKings points on average. The 0 receptions kind of concerning. I think, what is he? Is he dealing with an ankle injury or something? But he's going to definitely play here. Yeah, I think it's fine. Just because of how cheap he is. Yeah, because I love the correlation and I actually really like this game as well. So maybe a Matt Ryan, Julio Jones, Hayden Hurst stack is something you can look at running it back with Darren Waller or Nelson Aguilar. I actually like that quite a bit.
Yeah, so we're talking about seemingly ugly plays, Nelson Aguilar and Hayden Hurst coming off of a 0. While we're on the topic, I'll throw out one more kind of grimy play. Todd Gurley right now is number 2 in the NFL in red zone carries. He has made the Millie Maker winning lineup multiple times because when this offense produces points, which they do fairly often because their defense is so bad and they have a good quarterback, which is like the Seattle and Dallas recipe for success in terms of fantasy has been the same thing. Sometimes they get into the red zone and it goes to Todd Gurley. In fact, it very often goes to Todd Gurley, given his, like I said, number 2 red zone carry stat. Any interest in trying to maybe correlate a Darren Waller and Todd Gurley? I think Todd Gurley is at least interesting. He'd be a very low owned play with multi-touchdown upside, I'd argue. I mean, he's done it before, so I'll say he still has it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if he's 5,500, if he goes in there and gets 2 touchdowns in a game, which he has before this year, 9 touchdowns on the year, yeah, I like it. I don't know how much I'm going to have really, but I do think that's really interesting there against this Raiders run defense. That's not all that good there, but yeah, I think it's fine. I might throw some in there.
Next game is I don't care. It's Los Angeles versus San Francisco. Los Angeles, a very exciting offense, but I think it mostly comes in the context of when they play in good games because they're one of the most run-heavy teams when they have a lead. They're projected as 7.5-point favorites over San Francisco, and San Francisco just trotting out a slew of backups. I know they're dinged up at the offensive line, will not have their starting quarterback, their star tight end. I mean, to me, this team, the San Francisco team, is just a mix of practice squad and NFL level players that makes it very difficult. And the 45.5-point total reflects that. So it makes it very difficult to really get interested in their side of the ball. And on the other side of the ball, obviously Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods, as we saw, I think went for 275 yards the last time we saw them, I think Monday night. If they're going to be 7.5-point favorites, do they actually even throw enough to get there? I would argue it seems like that's not the case. They're one of the more run-heavy teams and they have a lead. But that doesn't translate to one running back having massive days. They're basically running this 3-headed backfield. Is like, can you sell me on any part of this game? I just have a difficult time deciphering anything in terms of the upside.
No, I can't sell you on anything really here. I guess Jordan Reed, a nice cheap tight end play at 3,600. But other than that, on the San Francisco side, I like pretty much nothing. I mean, the Rams defense in general is pretty solid there, and I'm just not interested in any play. On the Rams side, you touched on them a little bit. Cooper Kupp, Robert Woods are definitely fine, but how's that going to work out if the Rams do get out to a big lead? And again, you touched on it, 3-headed monster in the backfield. You can't play that on DraftKings, so this is probably like one of the ugliest games on the slate from a DraftKings perspective.
All right, one more ugly game, but then we end with a banger. I promise. This first one, Denver versus what I thought was Alvin Kumar and the Saints nuts, the Taysom Hill show and the Saints. This one is a 44-point total, has come down to, and the Saints are 5.5-point favorites. I guess the biggest question is with Taysom Hill being under center, and like obviously he is the quarterback throughout the entirety of the game. There's no shenanigans with them rotating quarterbacks. We're going to see 4 quarters of Taysom Hill, and if we don't, it's probably because he and this entire offense got crushed, so you wouldn't play them in that scenario anyways. Are we going to see a different version of Alvin Kamara than we have seen through, 3.5 years now? Is he actually just a between the tackles player with Taysom Hill essentially converting, at least seemingly, converting these quarterback dump offs into quarterback rushes?
So the whole Alvin Kamara situation is very frustrating, especially since I did have a decent amount of Kamara last week. The dude, zero receptions last week, 1 target, only 13 carries, and you see Latavius Murray going out there and getting 12 carries himself, 2 receptions. He actually got more receptions than Alvin Kamara. I really can't believe it there. So, yeah, the Taysom Hill situation definitely scares me from Kamara, especially him being 8,200. It's really, really hard to go back there, especially with him splitting carries, splitting time on the field with Latavius Murray. I guess the only thing I'm really interested in is actually nothing, but I guess Taysom Hill's interesting at 6,200 just because of the rushing yard upside, lots of touchdown upside. Him and Michael Thomas had some good connection last week, 12 targets to Michael Thomas, 9 receptions. Thomas had 22.4 DraftKings points. That's probably the only way I'd look, but even then, like the run back options for Denver are really bad. This Denver offense is really bad. I really don't like this game at all.
Yep, I agree. The Denver run back is bad. I think even with Michael Thomas finally having over 100 yards last week, it's still just an okay correlation play because now that Taysom Hill is efficiently priced, if he say goes for 250 and a touchdown but doesn't get there on the ground, he doesn't score the rushing touchdown. That probably means that it's a fine enough game for one of them, but that means Taysom Hill didn't have a great game. If he goes for 60 and 2 touchdowns again or whatever, he had like 50 and 2 touchdowns, I think. If he does that, there's almost no way that Michael Thomas has a great game. So because now Taysom Hill is accurately priced, Michael Thomas still expensive, I think the correlation between them is modest as opposed to like a Matt Ryan is drawing dead to even top like 10 yards. He's throwing, if he has a ceiling game, he is throwing for 360 yards and 3 touchdowns. If he's winning you GPPs, that's how he's getting there. That means that without a doubt, one of his, if not multiple of his receivers are going to get there. You don't have that exact correlation with players like Lamar Jackson, with players like a Taysom Hill, even with Kyler Murray. So to me, because of that, this game, I'm pretty much writing it off. We end with a banger, though. I told you we'd get here. We get to maybe my favorite game of the slate. It is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers as 3-point dogs to the Kansas City Chiefs, a 55.5-point total that is currently on the rise. And I believe right now leads the entire main slate. It actually, because of line movement, passed that Atlanta game. So I think on the Kansas City side, I'm not getting too cute. Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce are both great plays. I am totally down to eat the Travis Kelce chalk simply because there are so few good plays at tight end. I'm willing to pay up and eat the chalk. I'm mostly willing to do that because the other side of the ball is where I think I'm going to be able to build highly leveraged and unique lineups. I'm down to stack Tom Brady and any of his receivers. I know people have talked about he's like 0 of 22 on his past 22 deep balls. I don't really care. Like we have a fairly large sample early in the season, and then obviously the GOAT career sample of him being an efficient passer and an accurate passer at all depths of the field. Through the first 7 weeks, he was top 10 in adjusted completion percentage on his throws of 20 yards or more downfield. I think most likely, I'm not 100% confident, but I think most likely his recent struggles are a blip on the radar. I'm willing to buy the dip in terms of price, and specifically, I don't think he'll be super popular, and I'm willing to stack him with just about anyone. I think I'm a little concerned about Chris Godwin. I think he's seen the fewest targets of all 3 receivers since Antonio Brown took the field. I think my rank order probably goes Mike Evans, still Chris Godwin, and then Antonio Brown, because our prior on Chris Godwin is that he takes a ton of targets, both from Mike Evans and from anyone else. But this recent stretch does have me a little concerned. I'm fine with any form of the stack, though. You can sell me on anything. The run back options are easy and good. What are you doing on the Tampa Bay side? Because, like, I don't know. Play Chiefs players when you can afford to at all costs.
Yeah, so on the Chiefs side, like of course, like the stack looks fantastic. Mahomes Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce. It's just how expensive it is. So if you're able to pay down to other positions, I think that's a fantastic stack. I love the matchup against Tampa Bay that just got shredded by the Rams the other day there. And Mahomes is an absolute stud, and so is Hill, and so is Kelce. So I like those big three a lot. But you mentioned it a little bit on the Tampa Bay side. I think this is going to be very interesting because I think that Tom Brady is going to be so low owned. Like everybody saw him, he looked awful his last game, but he has a ton of good pass catching options, and they're really cheap as well. You have Mike Evans 6,100, Chris Godwin 6,000, Antonio Brown 5,700. It's so easy to stack that Tampa Bay side and run it back with like a Hill or a Kelce. That I actually like that a lot, and I do think it's going to be a little bit different this week. I think if anything in this game, people are going to be playing Mahomes, Hill, Kelce stacks, something like that. So I think if you do the Tom Brady side, you are getting different, and you're still getting action on this game that I do think is going to be important. We had the highest total on the slate here, so yeah, kind of with you there. I like Mike Evans. I'd probably go Mike Evans, Antonio Brown, Chris Godwin. I still think Godwin's a good play though, but Antonio Brown was getting so many targets last week: 13 targets in week 11, 8 targets in week 10, 9 targets in week 5. Or in week 9, so it's going up each and every time there. So in theory, he's going to get more targets there than he did last week. And yeah, Tom Brady likes him quite a bit. So yeah, I'm definitely looking at the Tom Brady, Antonio Brown stack, double stack. You can pick between Godwin or Evans. It really doesn't matter. They're all so cheap, and then run it back with your Hills or your Kelces. I like that a lot.
Yep, I completely agree. I think maybe the only interesting thing I have in this game is if Sami Watkins comes back, he is simply an every down player on this offense. We have seen them rotate between like Byron Pringle, Demarcus Robinson, Mecole Hardman. They don't rotate their number 2 whenever Sami Watkins is healthy. To start the year, he had 9 targets, then 3, then 8, then 7, got injured in the following game. He is like an every down player for Patrick Mahomes at, I believe he's 4,700. Yeah, 4,700. And he was getting targets early in the season. He's not just running wind sprints. He's getting the ball from Patrick Mahomes at 4,700. I don't see what's not to like here.
Yeah, 100%. Especially at that price, it makes stacks a lot easier. Good run back option at a cheap price. And I was kind of surprised. Sami Watkins was really bad last year, and he came in this year doing actually pretty solid. So he hasn't played since week 5, I believe. So he's coming back here really cheap, hopefully low owned. I do like Sami Watkins as well. Glad you mentioned that.
I forgot we have technically one more game on the main slate, I believe. Baltimore-Pittsburgh got bumped from the Thursday night game. I believe DraftKings did put it on the main slate. I'd prefer to end on Chiefs Tampa Bay because I really don't have a ton of interest. I think Pittsburgh receiver one-offs are perfectly fine. Juju logged a limited practice. I think they're all going to play. Deontay, basically, whenever he's healthy, is seeing double-digit targets. I'm fine with running these one-offs. Outside of that, really not much interest on the other side. Maybe some Mark Andrews as like a correlation play, but even then, it's fine. Pittsburgh receivers as one-offs is all I have to offer.
Yeah, 100% with you. One-offs, Deontay Johnson, fantastic. Claypool, fantastic. Other than that, really not interested in it.
All right, and that will do it then. I'm glad we got to I'll say we ended on the best game of the slate with that Tampa Bay game. So for myself on Twitter at Kyle Tweets here, for Brady at DFS_numbers. Everyone, thanks for tuning in. We will catch you guys next week.